it and for any anomalies or anything, so they can adjust that. So that's kind of what they do. They also facilitate like a forward. There's several different like energy markets. Like, so people like companies can participate in auctions to trade energy to different, and you can even like trade it across like different regions. So there's like transmission involved. And so it's a big field with like a lot of moving parts and a lot of things that are changing. It's really interesting, and I'm not like an expert in it by any means, even though I've worked there for like 4 years. But so that's a little bit about me and what I'm doing currently. The topic today kind of came up. I was kind of reflecting on how I decided to talk on this specifically, and like I was touring the control room at my work, which I hadn't done before. And so when you go in this control room, they have these huge monitors and displays where they're monitoring like the entire their entire footprint, where they manage the grid. And I'll pull up their footprint. So it was interesting to me because so one of the roles of a solutions architect is, as changes, I'm new to the role as well, so it's I find it fascinating the more that I learn. But as a solutions architect in an enterprise, it's less just focus on like technology as far as in my company at least, and it's more of getting like to know the business and being able to understand the business and the technology, and be able to come up with a solution that way, and not necessarily implement the solution myself, but be able to facilitate it, because there's several different people involved with delivering a product, several different teams, and so trying to get all of them to communicate and understand complex requirements. It's like a game of telephone. So you'll have a conversation and you might have it several times and you might hear several different things. So an architect will try to like capture that and convey it to different audiences in different ways. So that's kind of what the role that I'm taking on. But one of the initiatives that they were talking about is like modernizing their control room. And so they want to do all new real-time displays. And they were talking about, which I thought was interesting, having like heads-up displays. So these people were kind of hesitant, I think, to do that, but it was interesting to think about. They would be sitting there, monitoring the grid without any screens. So that's a little bit about the topic and how I stumbled upon wanting to dabble with this. Ben, do you think we're ready to?
Yes, we have about, let me see, 6 people. Yeah, I guess because it's already 10 minutes. Like they are probably gonna join later. But I just wanted to say a couple of words first.
Yeah.
I'll say it in French, in English and French. So if anybody speaks French only or has any difficulty following in English, feel free to ask questions in French. Donc, comme je le disais tout de suite, si quelqu'un dans l'audience a des difficultés à suivre en anglais, il peut tout simplement poser des questions en français et on peut répondre aussi. Puis le contenu pour supporter la présentation aujourd'hui, enfin, dans la mesure du possible, des traductions incluses dedans aussi. Donc, sinon, c'est pas un problème. Okay, Derek, I think you can get started.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that, because anytime you want to say anything or have any questions, make sure they're like, feel free to jump in. That'd be great if this is more of like a dialogue and a conversation and exploration of these technologies than me just sitting talking about it. So I'll share here. Can everybody see my screen? And is it big enough for them to see?
Yep. Yeah, maybe increase the font just one more.
I don't even know if we can go that high.
I think that's good.
Okay. All right, so real-time data visualizations. So for this example or this demonstration, we're using Python, HTMX, and LLM-generated SQL queries. That's kind of what we'll be featuring as we discuss this. So one thing that is becoming increasingly important or valuable in like to most businesses is being able to use their data as an asset. And one of the most efficient ways that the more efficiently that one can manage and visualize and realize value from their data is that they're going to have an edge on competition. They're going to be able to understand their customers a little better. And so I think that's like a big motivation for companies right now. And visualizations, being able to just, read something is not as powerful as demonstration. I think I was in like a training like a few weeks or months ago, and this guy was talking about emphasizing demonstration defeating discussion when you're trying to do something or convey a message. So with the power of like being able to realize your data as an asset, the faster that you're able to do that, and the more the faster feedback you get, the easier, the more gains you get realized sooner. And so with real-time data, you're able to get immediate insights. You're able to and be more engaged with your user base, whether it's like a product or whether it's an internal team that needs to mitigate issues with the software that you're using, or if it's a product that your customers are relying on. Being able to provide that fast feedback and reassurance is going to be more engaging, as well as being able to use more modern technologies to process this data more efficiently and streamline other processes. For instance, this isn't necessarily tied to like, well, it is tied to visualization. At my company, they process, they run simulations on their footprint. So I'll show you again, or I didn't show you actually. So this is, can you see this? Is this big enough?
Yes, that's good.
Okay, so these are all the regions in the US and this part of Canada, I think it's Manitoba, that my company, they monitor the grid, and they also will, there's other systems operators in other regions that they need to trade or transmit data, or not even data, energy to and from. So, but the department that I work for is planning. So as there's a push for renewable energy, and there's like, we're decarbonizing how we generate electricity, right? We're using like more like renewable resources. It's better for the environment. And as we do that, like, we have to plan for that change in all of these different areas, so that my company they use external software, like third-party software, to run simulations across this grid. So they basically collect a whole bunch of data from a bunch of other companies, other parties, and they aggregate it to build a model, and then they take these projects, which a project is really like, say I want to add a generator over here and some transmission over here, and you take that and spread it across this whole area, and then you run a simulation against it, and then you make some changes and you run another simulation against it, and you do that for like 20 years. You know, they're needing to take this data, and they want to see, you know, what are the changes across the years, what are the risks as you know, the environment changes, is all these external things change. So being able to leverage more modern, like more modern tools, and being able to process more data efficiently, being able to automate these processes, because currently there's a lot of room for automation, and I think that's going to be common across like a lot of companies as they take paper document, you know, as we move from paper documents to digital modern file systems. You're going to have more data. So another thing that's important or useful is being able to predict, like I just talked about. So real-time data with machine learning. I'm interested in getting into machine learning aspect of the project that I'm working on. That's going to come in like the next few years. Right now, we're like collecting all this data, and then we're going to, you know, realize the value from it after we are able to do that. And so here is an overview of a data pipeline or data pipelines. And so a data pipeline is the process to which you gather, process, or transform and load this data into a data store, and then you're able to extract this data and use it for other purposes like visualizations or machine learning and data analysis. You're probably going to tell as I'm talking that like data science and data engineering are topics that I'm trying to get up to speed or more familiar with. So I might mince some terms here and there, and feel free to hop in if I do that. But here is like a cool graphic that I found of a data pipeline that's using like Azure resources. And if it would let me zoom in more, I would make it bigger. Are you able to see any of these individual resources?
Yeah, we can see, but how easy is it to bring it back to light mode instead of dark mode? How easy it is?
Let's see. Let's go to the site. That easy.
Okay. Yeah, that's much better, I think. Yeah.
That easy.
Yeah.
Yeah, so here we have unstructured data. So this could be logs from your application, or it could be just files, like in my case, like I was talking about, like the simulation, that the application that we use that produces the output of the simulation results that the systems that we're building need to process. It does it in flat files. And since it's third-party software, we're kind of, our hands are tied right now. So like we're working with flat files. Any other media? Here's, a concept that I am really not familiar with, but started hearing more about it. Is like the Internet of Things and being able to attach sensors on devices and collect that and use it, and then customer sentiment data. I don't even know what that is. It's like health metrics. Aziz or Ben, you know it.
Yeah, so customer sentiment data could be pretty much anything. So whether, like you said, it could be health metrics. It could also be comments that one makes on perhaps Twitter or Amazon that could be used to analyze customer sentiment analysis. So whether to figure out whether the person is happy, not happy, those kind of things. So it's being able to get those kind of information. Yeah.
Yeah, like
Okay.
pretty much there's a power outage and then people start complaining on Twitter.
Yeah.
Customer satisfaction kind of stuff, right? Data that helps maintain customer satisfaction. Is that?
Yeah, in a way, yeah.
Okay. Okay, and then yeah, you have structured data over here. There's business applications pumping. So all this data is being, there's a Azure Internet of Things hub that's ingesting this data. You got Azure Data Factory here that's ingesting this data. Blob storage, so it's storing it as in blobs, and then so Azure Databricks, I'm not familiar with.
Yeah, so Databricks is, you could think of it as like, it's, first of all, Databricks is a company that builds platform where you can do a bunch of analytics on it. So where you can build pipelines and do analytics, whether it's machine learning, data science, among other things. They do a lot more things. Now, the interesting part about Azure Databricks, especially in regards to Azure, is that within Azure itself, you can spin up a Databricks environment where, basically as you ingest the data into like Azure Blob storage, you can have a Databricks environment where you have access to that data and to start do things with it. Whether it's like SQL stuff or writing Spark jobs, things like that. So it's like a self-contained environment to do a bunch of analytics. It's similar to Anaconda with Jupyter notebooks and stuff, but way more advanced, I guess. Yeah. If anybody else know about Databricks, please chime in. But that's kind of like what Databricks does.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So then here, it pipes some data here. Yeah, I don't know what Polybase is, but it's somehow ingesting some data to a data warehouse, which is an Azure SQL data warehouse. And then here, it's being used for analytics and visualizations. Here, it's got a Spark connector, and Spark is a streaming software. Not as familiar with it. Haven't used it. I know that you can use. I've used PySpark in a proof of concept, which was interesting, and I think that's you can use that in this process. Like at my work, they have this is common as I'm finding, they have a zone where I think we'll find another image for this. Hopefully we can find it. Okay. Can you kind of see this?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there's
we can
different.
see it.
So there's going to be like different stages within a data pipeline.
Derek, I think you have a question from John.
Yeah.
John, go ahead.
Thank you. Quick question, Derek. Is part of your data
Absolutely.
collection that you're using, is part of your data collection using Hadoop? And the only reason why I asked is because you're using the Apache Spark.
It's not Hadoop, and this, I should clarify, this this is not the like stack or not a setup that I'm using. This is an example.
Okay. Sorry for the confusion. Thank you.
No problem. So Hadoop is there's like Hadoop, and then there's Spark, correct? Like Spark is like an equivalent to Hadoop. Is that?
Yeah, so to clarify, Hadoop, the technology Hadoop has kind of become, some companies still use it. It was very popular, I would say, 7-10 years ago, when the whole big data word was very popular. And I think because of how cloud has become much more popular, the technology Hadoop itself, with the underlying technology like MapReduce and the HDFS file system, not many companies are still using it. Now, Spark, which I believe was created by Databricks, or the people at Databricks, is still used because that is a language used to actually process data, right? And it's similarly in Hadoop, MapReduce was the technology used to process data, So these days, people are using more Spark or other languages to write jobs. So fewer companies are actually using Hadoop now, mostly because I guess it's becoming less and less desirable. So, but Spark is still used.
Yeah. Thank you for hopping in. And I know, because I know my company is using PySpark, and one of their, I think in there, let me go back to the zones. So yeah, there's different zones where your data can be ingested. So in this other diagram, we have the unstructured data. It's not really showing these zones here, but so you take your structured or unstructured data, and it gets ingested into cloud storage, whether that's blob storage or some sort of file storage, or any other storage option that is available on that platform to meet your use case. Then they might have, so at my work, they call this the landing zone, and then they take and they copy that data into another zone, and I think they have that's called the raw zone. So they have this zone here where it's cleaned up, but it's still raw data. And then they have another zone that they have for a staging area. So this is equivalent, I'm guessing, to this data warehouse here that they have. And then from this staging area, they have what they call a curated zone. So like each system or team or I don't know exactly how they split it up, but each team gets their own bucket to place their data on this platform. And then it's only through the curated zone, through configuration that's maintained, and that you're able to access data from other zones or others from other systems, combine it and use it in whatever downstream applications that you or whatever use cases you may need it for. But I found this is a common pattern. I might be saying something that far more familiar with, but it was something new that I was learning about. All right. To Obsidian. And so data collection, the first stage, the data processing after it's collected, storing it, and then being able to visualize it. And there's far more that goes into all this, because there's different types of storage and there's different costs associated to that storage. How much data do you need to store? So that's always something that working with the business, what I'm learning is like having to figure out based on their, not necessarily what their like hard requirements are, like we need to ship this within this time frame. Like these architecture characteristics or things that aren't necessarily functionality are sometimes what constrain the infrastructure and the architecture and how you deploy and build your solutions. So that's always something to keep in mind when looking at, especially if you're playing around with any of these cloud solutions, because I've bitten myself consuming too much data. So a use case is kind of like what I discussed, where this would be useful is like in a systems operator being able to manage and oversee the operations of the electrical grid. A systems operator needs to ensure that they can reliably deliver electricity from power plants to consumers. So there's like three electric grid three pillars. So here is like an oh. Okay, I can't find a quick example, but you basically have generation. So the power plants or the power companies produce the electricity. Then it goes on to transmission lines, which are high voltage lines, so they can handle a lot of electricity. And then those get stepped down to distribution lines. So at any time, like they're managing, MISO cares about, or a systems operator is really doesn't care about the distributed generation. it's kind of managing this flow to, so distribution is industrial, it's commercial and residential. Those are the, you know, who's are taking, the 3 customers who are taking in electricity. So they're overseeing this, and there's always somebody there and watching the grid, and they all have these different roles, and it was pretty interesting being in that room with all of them when they're doing their work. So they do have advanced tools and in order to detect these anomalies and make sure that they're ensuring reliability. So they're monitoring the grid performance, they're monitoring supply and demand. I didn't realize, like, I'm again not like an expert on electricity, but like it's very like delicate, like how much load and is on a transmission line at any given time. Because if you add too much, then lines can sag, and there's all this other stuff. So they also need to respond to outages or emergencies. So like if a generator goes out, they have to, you know, there's companies that have reserves in backup in order to mitigate that. So they basically need to use these displays to be able to detect all these things in different areas, and they have to respond quickly. So yeah, real-time monitoring for and anomaly detection for all those things I discussed. And so here are some examples. Like here's the company I work for. I don't know that these are necessarily real time, but like here's the different the fuel mix. So here's all the different types of generation, and then it checks the grid conditions and shows that. Here's like supply and demand. And then, so here's some real-time displays.
I've got a question, Derek.
Oh yeah.
Any insights on preventing hacking? Like how, you know, like the grid, the national grid needs to be protected, right? You know, because it's one of those like strategic areas that, you know, once you bring down the grid, and you pretty much cripple the country, right? So do you know anything about what they do? Not necessarily what they exactly do, but like, you know, how they protect, you know, things like that. Like, do you have any insight in that? Or
yeah, so luckily I have never worked on the real-time critical applications. And I'm happy that it happened. So I'm not sure exactly what security measures are in place, but since I've stepped into my newer role, like I've had to have more of those conversations and think about those things more. And like there is a security architect that I work with directly. So if like I have a question, I will go to him. So as I get in this role, I could definitely, you know, get some insight. I know I know, like, because I talked about hearing about Internet of Things and sensors. I know I was in on like a discussion where they were talking about protecting those sensors. And that was an interesting discussion, way over my head. Interesting though.
Yeah.
So it's a great question.
Yeah. I suspect, I guess my inclination is to think that perhaps, you know, for certain application, it's not, they may, similar to like in banking and similar to healthcare, right? They may have protection around, for example, certain technologies that you cannot use right off the, right off the gate. Like, for example, you're not going to be able maybe to download things online and use it right away. You know, maybe they have guardrails on, what you can push to productions, those kind of things. I'm thinking maybe, but I was just kind of curious to know, you know, like other things. But I no, that's all right, no problem.
Yeah, I'll take that as like a note to get more information. And I'm curious. There is like a so I'm obviously not going to tell you any of this information that I find out, but there's like a security briefing meeting that I am invited to like every morning, but it's at like 7:45 in the morning. So I could be a lot more up to speed on that, but I don't make it. So yeah, so I just saw some movement. So this is a real-time display of, so this is markets. So one thing that's crazy about that, it's probably not just my company, but like acronyms are just so prevalent all over the place. But so LMP, I think, is locational marginal price. So this is a price based on the location. I think, I don't know what the margin is exactly, if it's like, yeah, I don't know, to be honest. But I know there's more. So then there's operations displays. Oh. So it shows, so here a constraint is like something, you know, they want to mitigate or track. These are all market participants. Okay, so then there's like operations displays. So this is showing in real time how much of each type of fuel is being contributed to the footprint and how many megawatts are being produced. And then they also do, you know, forecasting for renewable resources. So checking a day ahead so that they can adjust their plans accordingly. Same with solar. So I'm not going to jump into too many more examples, but if you just look for it, this is just for energy dashboards. Like there are a lot. All right, so now we'll go into kind of the we put together and some of the technologies that were used. So right off the back, I'll say I'm a Java. My background is in Java, and even before that, my background is actually in graphic design. So I don't have any computer science background or anything like that. But I've been in the industry for like 10 years or so. So this is my first, this is the most I've coded in Python. That wasn't just like tutorials or like simple scripts. So, but Python, if you're not familiar with it, it's a scripting language. It's an interpreted programming language, and it's quite popular because of its accessible syntax. It's very easy to read, and it's quite approachable. It also has a lot of extensive libraries that make it easy to get something up and running that's productive with not a lot of, you know, code or even boilerplate. It also has great community support, and this kind of goes along with the data science support. Because it's such a popular language in the data science community, there's extensive libraries and tools that are built for processing large amounts of data. What's interesting is also, like at my work, a lot of the processes that we're, or not even at this job, in the past, Python has been so approachable that I've seen like business people pick it up and start automating their own processes, and that turns into like, you know, a project that it's actually tech debt that it's, I don't know how they create tech debt without like a project or anything, but so like it's interesting to just because they're able to pick it up and run with it without any extensive programming experience, and they use it for, you know, production or like their actual work. We also, so that is the reason we picked, one of the reasons I picked that for the visualizations. And the other thing that lends itself well is the Python generators. So Python generators, they're basically a way of generating so you basically produce a set of items and you process them one at a time. And as you do that, as the item is being handed off, you're holding on to the state of the next item. I think it's the next item. So then, whereas like a normal function would just process all the items in the list straight through, you're able to lazily process this list so that you're conserving memory. So really, you could have an unbounded list and just continuously process it. So which makes it useful for streaming. So here's an example where it starts, you get a generator object. I think it would help to show this. So you're defining your generator object. And then, so as you encounter an object, or you yield, and as you yield, you save the state, and you return you return that value, and then that exits, and then you resume processing, and you keep it keeps processing the values. And so it's non-eager behavior, makes it memory efficient, and also, you know, it's that statement, it's that maintaining that internal state, being able to continuously process those items. And another technology that we're using, or software that we're using, is async IO. So when you're processing data specifically from, like, say, another service or an API, and you are trying to stream that data, you don't want to wait for you might not want to wait for all of this data, right? So if by using asynchronous operations, you can, you know, process the data by creating these tasks. And then, so you are asynchronously performing these operations, and then when they're done, you have the callback, and then you're able to resume. So the main purpose is to not block these calls while the server is processing the data, just so you can remain doing other tasks like streaming and or making additional calls. You know, you might need to make several calls and combine the data and return it. You might need to stream the data to another message bus or another source, So you don't want to wait for all of that data to be consumed before you start performing these operations. It's again, it yields to that the performance and user engagement. So here's an example, simple example of defining a coroutine. And so you give it a delay, and then it's what it's going to execute. And so then here's the main coroutine. So it's going to call this, and this is going to wait 2 seconds, and this would wait 1 second before it would print. So this would print hello world after 1 second, and this would print hello world after 2. And so here you're defining the function and you're using the async keyword. And so here you have to wait in order for the results, in order to start the in order to start processing the data. Another technology that we use is SQL Alchemy. So we're using SQL Alchemy to store results from an API that I'll go over, and then we're asynchronously streaming the results back. So SQL Alchemy is, here are some of its features. The main benefit that I've seen, I'm not familiar with it, but it does have the asynchronous functionality. So here's an example of like how you would create a synchronous query. So we have SQL Alchemy. We have the ability to create the engine, and then we have the ability to create an asynchronous engine. And then here's just a synchronous session maker, and here's an asynchronous session maker. So we have both. So then here I don't have the model here, but it just simply holds like an hourly value. So we're querying from this model where this responded is basically like a company, where we're filtering for the company I work for, and not ordering by anything really, and then limiting the results to 24. So similarly, where are we doing the session? So here we are starting our synchronous session, and here we have our asynchronous session, doing our execution, and here you see we have to do that await again in order to get the results. And that, is there anything you'd like to add about this?
Yeah, so if you understand well, the synchronous version is blocking, and then the asynchronous version of SQL Alchemy is non-blocking, right? So that will mean that when the server is running, which is single-threaded, like if there is a need to do a very large select statement to the database, the synchronous version will basically block everything else, since Python is single-threaded, until it returns all the results. Whereas in the asynchronous version, the server can still can keep serving out the requests, while this non-blocking query can keep going. So is that about right?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and that was something that that caught me. Was I didn't realize initially that there was two that I needed this extension to add the async functionality. Ben helped me out with that. So this then the other so this if you see a common theme here, a big part of being able to do real-time displays is being able to process things asynchronously. And so there's a different gateway interface that's used for Python web applications for asynchronous requests. And Ben, can you clarify? Is it like can you only? It's not like restricted to this, is it, or is it restricted to this? Like, can you still make asynchronous requests using this interface, or is it only possible with?
No, I think the WSGI is synchronous, meaning that for each request, it's gonna try to spawn another process to handle it, right? Whereas for the ASGI, it's asynchronous. So it's basically gonna do the event loop as you were showing earlier, and process requests like asynchronously. That's why it makes sense to whenever the ASGI is used to use as much as possible asynchronous versions of libraries. Like that async SQL alchemy that we saw earlier.
Yeah, sometimes I get spoiled with these high level frameworks that I'm like not worried about the gateway, like the interface, like at that level. So thank you. So yeah, so that is why that this asynchronous standard is supported for the asynchronous features and web applications for Python. So it can handle, so here's that comparison, so it can handle many concurrent connections, which makes it suitable for WebSockets, long polling, other long-lived connections like server-side events that we'll discuss in a bit. It's compatible with the old standard. Yeah, and here's what I was kind of touching on about like asynchronous nature. And so I haven't done a ton of like asynchronous programming with in a reactive nature or streaming nature. I think the first time I was used to polling quite a bit. So the first time I reached for a tool was like this was Spring Webflux. And so you can not only so that's an example of I used that for improving user experience. So like we had a long running batch job, and so we were to be able to stream results back of how much longer the job was going to take. And so rather than to have to continuously have the client make requests, we use server-side events to stream that progress back to the client. And so that leads to server-side events and the asynchronous gateway interface and HTTP2. So this is HTTP2 is a revision of the HTTP protocol. It allows similarly to the asynchronous gateway interface is allowing, it allows for multiple concurrent requests, and server send events are standard that allow the server to push real-time updates to a client, like I had mentioned previously. The server needs to keep the connection open, and so the client will continuously sit there and process events while that connection is open, and the client is sending data, or the server is sending data. So here's some reasons why the asynchronous gateway interface is well suited for server send events. It's handling the multiple open connections and being able to manage them, being able to scale all of those connections, and the compatibility with HTTP2. And so here is a diagram, a mermaid diagram that depicts that. So it's here, it's showing that it can provide multiple requests concurrently and real-time updates from the, this is cut off.
Yeah, so Derek, so if I can jump in maybe to explain a little bit.
Yeah.
So in the context of the real-time, displaying real-time data, right? If you are familiar, like for the audience, if you're familiar with finance graphs, like the Yahoo Finance or Google Finance graphs, there is a lot of real-time data that gets pushed in through their servers, and people really want to see a stream of events being displayed so that they can make real-time decisions, right? So for a single viewer, potentially there will be like thousands of records being streamed to their web browsers. And since it's not only just one user, there might be like thousands of millions of users. It becomes way too expensive in terms of resources used to serve all those users at once. So what that means is that on the server side, it's important to build it in the most efficient manner as possible. So as Derek was showing earlier, the combination of generators and the async IO workflows makes it so that single records or single values get pushed at the time, but nothing gets loaded all at once in the server just to accommodate a single user. So it's really like on demand and per user. That way, the same work that will have that can serve one user can more easily scale up to handle like many more users. So Derek, I don't know, maybe do you want to show like a demo and explain some of the code?
Yeah. There it is. All right. So the first thing I'll go over is, so this is like it's similar to what I had showed earlier. This project is like an energy dashboard. So it's using, I'll show you here. So here we're creating like a FastAPI server, and we're also using Jinja 2 to render our like templates. So we have we're creating our asynchronous and synchronous connections here. And then I have a service. This service is used to retrieve data from the backend asynchronously. And before I go much further into that, I have previously, before this session, I have already loaded. So there's data for these years already loaded from an API. It's basically demand energy for a bunch of different companies and net generation for these years. So it's going to be that's the data that we're streaming back. So here we have, I'll go to the entry point of the index HTML template. So here, our base endpoint is going to serve our it's basically like an HTML file, but it's a template, and pass it our request. And here we're getting a list of all the potential companies to select from on the interface. So this will serve the page, and then next we need to be able to retrieve the data. So I have a service so this is used to stream all of the data, and I'm actually filtering based on the start and end date. And if we don't have any, then we're just, I think we're just returning everything. And so here we're preparing this statement. So this statement will get prepared, and it will use our filters and our row count. And then we're actually going to perform we're going to tell it we want to stream the results, and we're going to buffer the row count here. And so we're going to get the results stream, and we're going to iterate over that and store the results in a buffer. So the reason, so Ben can help me elaborate on this, and he helped me point this out. But so we basically, I found that I needed to stream in this case because, or buffer in this case, because it needed to be able to like have enough data to start processing the chart, right? Instead of doing it like one at a time. It also is to be able to like control how much data is being consumed at a given time.
Maybe if you show the chart, it's gonna be easier for the audience to see what you're explaining.
I want me to leave it a mystery.
Maybe can you increase the font a little bit? It's a bit small.
Yeah. Okay, so here we have the basic form where we can say these are all different respondents. So they basically contribute or help manage the grid. So like my company, for instance, is in here somewhere, myself. So if I select MISO and then I say I want to get the demand, and I want to get demand from December 23rd to, or December 10th to December 16th, and I roll the dice, and then I make this smaller. We'll see here. So it's streaming that data, and then so it's actually re-rendering this HTML component every time the DOM receives an event using HTMX, and we'll talk about that in a moment here. But that so when you're seeing it flash like that, that's because it's literally taking and building it the graph again server side and then sending it back in an event. So if we go here, this might be hard for you to see. Is there a zoom here? Okay. I apologize because I don't know how, oh, no, that's search. I don't know how to make this bigger. But you'll see here, once I submit, so it triggered the streaming, and then now here we're getting events. And in this event, we have, I'll go more into this, but we have this div, and then we have another div inside of it that has the component. And then there's a JavaScript script that's also nested within this div. And so every time we receive the event, it's swapping this, the div that was here with that.
Yeah, so how are those events related to buffering?
How are they related to buffering?
Yes.
So can you expound like what specifically you want me to touch on here?
Okay, so in this one, maybe if you can increase slightly, it's a bit small. So
Is that big enough?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So here I see that you're doing let me see. You're streaming the results from the database, right?
Yeah.
And the results are coming like a piece at the time. Right. So what's the use of buffering these results?
Differently than what I said earlier, like we're collecting, it's coming in one at a time. We need to collect them into a list that we can pass on to be processed.
Oh, I think you have a question. Nana, you can go ahead with your question.
Hello, hi. I joined a little late and I'm super excited. So I saw what you put up. Oh, can you guys hear me, please?
Can hear you.
Yeah. So I saw what was happening in the front end on the website, and just to clarify that I understand what's happening in the back end is you have you are streaming the data and there's a JS call from the front. Is that what's happening? Are you making a JS call from the front? Like what's causing it to refresh?
Okay, so what it's doing is, if I go to this page here, If you look at this, of course, unfortunately, the config's all spread out. So we have this. So imagine this div is on that page because it's a fragment. So we have a listener. We have a div here with a specific ID. We're calling it a listener. So with HTMX, there's an extension where you can basically connect. Ben can elaborate on the inner workings, but you can basically connect to an endpoint that sends back that events. I forget what the MIME type is, but those stream events. And so you can also say this SSE swap targets a specific message or a group of messages. And when you combine the SSE swap with this other attribute, which is OOB swap, it will replace that that div, the contents, or not even this div, the div that you're targeting with what you're streaming back, the contents of the event. So like the inner workings of all that, I'm not exactly sure how it's doing it, but it's basically connecting to that endpoint via this HTMX library, and then processing those events as they come from the server and swapping out the DOM elements.
So this is all showing up in the events tab on the right on your Chrome.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so pretty much HTMX is a library, a JavaScript library that allows us to skip writing JavaScript like at all, right? So, and it has some functionalities to update the DOM when necessary. And in this case, it's combined with the data visualization library, which renders the graph if you want server side, right? And when the form is submitted, the HTMX opens a connection to the backend, and through server sent events, it's one of the if you want it, you can think of it as a sub protocol for HTTP, which keeps the connection open, so that the server, like in the loop, can keep sending like new data. Right, so until the server says that there's no more data, the connection will stay open, right? So that's pretty much what's happening. So every piece of data that streams to the client, is picked up and then rendered by HTMX. So, and as far as the buffering is concerned, like you can see how the graph was progressing. It's because every piece of data that comes from the SQL query gets accumulated. So the first piece will draw the first dot, will be used to draw the first dot of the graph, and then it's added to the next piece, which keeps putting the dots together and then form the chart which is progressing.
Right.
So,
can you control? So maybe I'm missing something here. So can you control the interval at which the call is made to the database?
yeah. So okay. So the same way that I was just explaining how the server send events maintain a connection between the browser and the backend. In the same manner, that's asynchronous database query that Derek showed earlier. It's the same thing. It keeps a connection open with the database as well, right? So there's a live connection to the database, and one piece of data comes out at the time. And then at the same time, there is a live connection to the browser, right? And then in the middle, that event loop that Derek was showing is spinning, right, to look for the next task. So if it sees that a new row arrived from the database, it picks it up, it formats it in the with the proper format for the browser events, and then it sends it through the pipe. You know, so you can imagine the backend in this case is like a worker at the factory, like between two conveyor belts. There's one that manages the database records coming out, and then there's another one that manages the boxes that go to the client. You know.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, so I know, so in all honesty, that the buffering thing, I know I ended up doing like buffering twice to solve the use case that you were just talking about preserving the state as new data came in. I don't know how I ended up doing it twice, but so I had that chart state. There's a dictionary that's also holding that that state. I need to find the code. Yeah, here. So this, in my mind, is what is buffering, and I don't think we've finished our conversation. So, but here, yeah, we have, like, you can see I'll kind of walk through this streaming data function. So I have defining the X and Y axis state, and then so here, oh, this is yours. So I'm passing in params, and then here's where I'm using that stream that that service that's doing the streaming, and then we're yielding the data, and then when we're completed, we're yielding none. And when we receive none, so this is how it knows to stop trying to regenerate or process events. So once it's done processing the request, the data is now none. We render this chunk that has, this is a specific event that the DOM is listening for, called terminate. And we're swapping the content, replacing the contents of the div that's listening for the events with nothing. So we're basically removing what was listening for the events. I was running into some issues with this and on how to do this, because basically what I found was it would process all of the data and then loop back over it again, and process all that and loop back over it again. And so it was Ben that helped me, pointed to a previous solution where he was doing this, and it's pretty neat. So another thing I'll highlight about this, if I'm, can I go more into this, Ben, or do you want to take over for the next section? How much more do you want me to?
oh, let me see. Oh yes, so this part about the looping, right? Basically, once the server sent events HTTP connection is open, there's no good way to shut it down, right?
Right.
Like you usually for sites that display real-time information, they open it and then just leave it open until the user closes their browsers, right? But there are use cases where like the data can actually end. If it ends, there's no. I mean, it's a bit wasteful to keep a connection open when there's no new data, right? So in that case, to shut it down, what Derek showed was to basically remove the DOM node in the in the HTML, which is responsible for maintaining that connection. So if the DOM node goes away, the connection also terminates. So,
which is slick. And what I was gonna highlight is what you showed me is like it cleans. It's like it. So when this page renders, so if we go into this partial, there's a macro. So it's basically, it's got this function that takes in this configuration. So if you see here, it's checking, do I have this configuration? Only if I have the configuration do I render the listener. So the listener is not rendered by default. It's only when we trigger the form, when we submit the form, that it calls the endpoint trigger streaming. So it calls the endpoint with the parameters, and it creates the config. So now we have this where we have no evidence of streaming. We submit a form, we submit a request. All of a sudden, the elements appear that starts rendering and processing. Then when it's done, it just removes itself and it's gone from the DOM. I found that interesting, so I thought I would highlight that. Ben, do you want to go into the next section now?
yeah, like how are you able to render the graph on the server side?
Okay. So here, I want to make sure we have time for your section. That's why I keep asking. So let me know when we're running out of time for that. So on the server side, we're using this library called Bokeh. I don't know how to pronounce it. Bokeh. This was a newer library for me. I've never used it before, but it was pretty easy to pick up and start using. So on the server side, as we get data, and we're not doing a termination, we basically append that new data to the state, and then we call this function to create the chart. So now we have, our current state, and these are the parameters from the request. We're able to create a column data source. So this is a Bokeh specific function or object to handle the state of the columns, or the X and Y axis. And then we create the figure and pass it that, we create the figure. And so we're giving it, dimensions, giving it the X, defining like what the type of the X-axis is. Then we're formatting the figure. So you can do all like sorts of customizations to the graphs and the different elements of the graph. And then you can add, so there's like line hover features. So when you hover over a point, and then finally, so there's this function that you pass it your figure and it returns you back basically an object that contains the script and the div for your chart, to render your chart. So this gets passed back to here, and we basically just, I think this just wraps it in a dictionary, and then we render this that component.
Yeah.
And so here we're targeting this specific div. So if you look back on, if we look back on index JS, you'll see line chart. I don't know how this got all messed up, but here's line chart here. We're targeting this div. And how we're doing that is we're passing it into this render chunk, function. And we have a partial and this partial. So this is the event that's being sent. So we're basically we've created that component, and now we're wrapping it in some attributes in order to target the div and listen and process the events. And then so here we have the HTML markup and the script in order to render that graph. So this is what you're seeing in the events tab. What did I miss?
No, nothing. So pretty much the notable thing here, or at least the thing that's interesting here, is that Bokeh is usually used in the context of Python and data science. So you most likely, I pasted some links to Bokeh, and pretty much usually people will use such libraries as part of their Jupyter notebooks, right? Or maybe they will use another library called Streamlit, if they wanted to build a dashboard. So in this case, like what Derek did is to take a data viz library for the Python data science environment and then merge it into a web application, right? So the event that he showed that was streaming basically contains the HTML and the JavaScript tags necessary to render the graph. So every time a new version of that HTML makes it to the page, like the JavaScript that it contains, as well as the HTML markup it contains, will be used to override the existing graph, right? And the reason, again, for which the graph seems to keep drawing, it's because the newest piece of the streaming information contains the accumulation of the data so far. Yeah, so that's what he's showing here.
Better picture of it, yeah.
Yeah, so you can see the name of the event is chart, and then the data part is actually the div. You can see like with the ID line chart, and then like it's a long string, so like probably halfway through you will see the JavaScript tag. Yes, go ahead with your question.
Hey everyone. So are you guys buffering the render itself or just the data? Because from what I'm looking at, it looks like you guys are storing the render as well.
No, only the data is buffered.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. So the Bokeh basically is used in the backend to define the line chart, and then we tag the buffered data so far, to the whole thing, and then send it to the client. And then Bokeh just takes over from that point.
All right. Anything else we want to touch on?
Why
Or-
Bokeh?
Was HTMX used for kind of like the UI? Like, was that the one used for the UI? I guess let me rephrase my question. So, you know, you use Python to write your code. So what was actually used for the front end in terms of the, you know, was it Ginger or not Ginger? What is that? Now I'm forgetting the name of that Python library. Oh shoot, I forgot the name. Like, you know what I mean, right? Like, what was used to make the UI basically?
So it's Jinja 2 templates that are served with FastAPI, and the Jinja 2 templates have HTMX, Bokeh, and Bootstrap.
Bootstrap. Okay.
Yep. That is Bootstrap 5.3. So it's the latest Bootstrap. I hadn't used that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's it. I don't think there's any. I think the goal was to not have any JavaScript, like custom JavaScript. So let's see if I think last night I might have tried to break that, but we'll see. So yeah, I don't think we have. No, that's not right. Yeah, I think it would have been in here. So
yeah, no JavaScript, Python only.
Okay. So I see Bootstrap. Okay, that's I think what I was looking for. Yeah,
oh yeah, so here to see the actual dependencies, which I should have done. You're just using CDN. So there's Bootstrap, and then the Bootstrap icons. I hadn't used that. I was used to Font Awesome, and then here we're using. Here's the HTMX, and then here's the SSE extension. So here, I'll find that SSE page and paste it in the chat. And HTMX is it's real cool. I haven't used any of the like UI. Like I know that if you go to their site, they have a bunch of examples. So I'm interested in using more of that, trying more functionality from it. It was interesting because Ben was the one that told me about this, and like I so I mentioned it to people at work, and then they went out to a conference and like they were talking about it at that conference. So it was like, yeah, good timing.
That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, so Derek, what about some AI? Like, do you have
that's your section, isn't it?
Oh wow, there's AI? Damn, all right.
Is that your section?
No, man, it's all yours. I'm just I'm just watching.
All right. So Ben's gonna have to speak more to this, but so we thought at the last minute or like later, like how could we expand this and add more functionality and add like more modern tooling. So Ben came up with the idea of what if we were able to just create or write a prompt, have that generate a SQL statement based on our schema, and then have it query the data for us, and then in turn hook that into that pipeline and have it return and stream the events, really the components back to the UI. So this was, I'll kind of give a demonstration of that here. So here we have just a prompt. I need to get my prompt here. Okay, I think it's this one already. All right, so here we go. And I've noticed sometimes there's some inconsistency where it's rendering, but somehow the values or the way it's defining the x-axis, like the range is off. So it's plotting outside the view somehow. I think, Ben, if I recall, like that just, we've been doing the same prompt, right? And getting that would kind of happen sporadically. Or did that never happen to you? Did you?
Yeah, I think it started plotting on the right side.
Oh, right. That's what it's, yeah. That's what it was.
This one was weird because the prompt that was used is actually displayed on top of the chart, right? So the fact that it's a bit vague, you know, it just like basically shows a sorting order, right? So in a way, we are getting currently the last values first. That's why it's plotting from the right side.
Right, right. Okay, so then that's where this one comes in. So then if we tell it and be more specific, hey, we want you to sort ascending, then I think that's where, okay, yep. So here it started plotting from the left. And so while this is going, I'll open up man, what was I gonna, oh, I was gonna show the query that it generated. Might have missed it. So here's the query that prompt generated.
No, I think it comes after, I think.
Yeah, that's a create statement.
If you scroll down.
Or this is, sorry, yeah. This is, I don't remember what it's doing. This is so it can inspect the table, right? The schema.
Yeah, it's part of the schema. If you scroll up a little bit, you can see it. So it basically instructs the, no, you want too far. Yeah, go down. Go down a little bit. No, you skipped it. Just before the table definition. Yes, just a little bit more. Okay, so right there. So it says issue a valid SQL statement based on the following schema. Right, so this is the prompt for the LLM. And then if you scroll down, we should see the actual prompt somewhere. Yes, so the prompt is give me all the energy data for my soul between September and December 2023. Right, like this, that's the actual prompt. And then it makes a call to OpenAI, and then and then this is the generated SQL statement.
There it is.
I have actually a question.
Yes, go ahead.
So the LLM generates the SQL query, right?
Right.
But then how does the SQL query get translated back to the actual database? How does it get to the database?
Well, we poured libations for the ancestors. No, just joking. Yeah, it's in the code.
Okay.
Where do you want me to?
I think Mr.
LLM.
LLM. You can go ahead with your question.
Me or Afis?
Afis, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, Afis. Yeah.
it was more about like a feedback rather than a question, because I've noticed that when it was displaying the table, every time the table get refreshed, it moves back to the x-axis. That's one of them, and the other one is also the tooltip does disappear. So it might be good to actually have a way to pause the rendering so that any user who's actually like presenting on it can just pause it and then show the tooltip, and then it will also save the state.
Yeah, I think there's definitely like room for improvement. It was just like we did it like quickly, but there are ways to with HTMX to make the DOM updates smoother so that it doesn't flicker and like works much better. But yeah, and that was, we did it so quickly. So yeah, I think Alida has a question also. Go ahead.
Yes. Hi everyone. If you don't mind, I would like to talk in French.
Yes, go ahead.
Ok. Ok, merci. Merci, c'est vraiment une thématique très intéressante pour moi parce que je suis chargée de la gestion des connaissances et je me sens assez responsable de pouvoir et effectivement mettre à la disposition de mes collègues tout ce qui est donné ou information, et si possible en temps réel, parce qu'ils sont parfois sur plusieurs fronts et la demande en fait en information est très, très élevée. Alors, je ne suis pas technique, donc la dernière fois, j'étais en train de même plaisanter quand je vois un peu le fond noir avec beaucoup de lettres et de chiffres. Parfois, ça me fait un peu flipper, mais bon, je pense que peut-être si je commence à participer à vos séances, je vais avoir moins peur en fait de ces tableaux noirs comme je les appelle. Si j'ai bien compris, au regard de ce que j'ai entendu ce soir et des petites recherches que j'ai eu à faire parce que je ne connaissais rien j'entendais juste le nom SQL, LLM, et Python, etc. et tout. Mais quand j'ai fait la recherche, pour la visualisation des données en temps réel, alors si je comprends bien, lorsqu'on fait une requête, c'est LLM qui prend la requête et SQL parle à la base de données pour faire sortir, selon la demande, en fait, les données qu'il extrait, en fait, de la base de données. Et maintenant, Python essaie de faire le traitement et la visualisation et HTMX ou quoi.
HTMX, ouais.
Voilà, essaie maintenant de faire en sorte que cette partie temps réel là, ça veut dire les informations qu'on a demandées, ils puissent juste mettre à jour la partie concernée au niveau de la page, si j'ai bien compris.
Oui, c'est exactement. Okay. Donc, la première partie de la démo que Derek montrait, il y avait un formulaire où il rentrait les différents paramètres de ce qui devait être dessiné sur la page en termes de graphe.
OK.
Maintenant, l'idée pour une amélioration, c'était que, comme ça peut être un peu embêtant de rentrer plein de paramètres sur la page manuellement, est-ce que c'est pas plus intéressant de tout simplement parler avec un langage naturel et puis obtenir le même résultat? Donc, c'est ça qui vient de juste montrer dans la deuxième partie de la démo, où là, en langage naturel, il donne sa requête, en fait, qui part à l'intelligence artificielle, genre avec OpenAI, qui va maintenant traduire cette requête-là en SQL. Et puis maintenant, le SQL est utilisé pour interroger la banque de données selon les paramètres qui ont été mis dans... Je ne sais plus comment on dit ça en français. Mais enfin, selon les paramètres de la requête du début. Et puis, quand les données sortent, en utilisant le même mécanisme que dans la première partie de la démo, les informations commencent à être emmenées au web browser pour qu'on puisse voir le graphe. Maintenant, le rôle de HTMX, c'est de prendre les nouvelles données qui viennent du serveur et puis faire les changements dans la page web.
OK. D'accord. Je pense que ça, c'est plus rassurant, peut-être pour nous qui ne parlons que les langages, humains, excusez-moi l'expression.
Oui.
Oui, je pense que vraiment, si ça c'est possible, ce serait très bien. Pour les non-techniciens, effectivement, ce serait très bien.
Exactement.
Merci, merci. Et merci à Derek. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I can quickly translate. Alida had a question about the difference between the first part of the demo and the second one. So I was explaining simply that in the first part, the user had to enter all the fields of the form to obtain the graph according to the certain parameters. And then as an enhancement for user experience in the second part, the user can simply use natural language to make the same request and obtain the same results. So that's about it. Yeah, Chaku, you can go ahead with your question.
For me, my question is just, how can I monetize this when it's all done and say, comment je peux monétiser cela? Et est-ce qu'il me donne une garantie de pouvoir avoir une sécurité lorsque j'utilise cela?
I mean, to monetize, I mean, I don't have a good answer for that. But if you, I mean, for security, I think the first thing that comes to mind is that you can place this behind a login with like maybe some granular like access level, so that only the people you really want to know, so that the people you really want to have access to these features can access it. You know, and yeah.
I think to monetize, I don't really necessarily see directly monetizing like this per se. However, I think if you're able to build something like this for companies, as Alida was alluding to, not a lot of people, for example, want to directly interrogate the database with like SQL, for example. But if you are able to use natural language with LLMs in order to, let's say, hey, can you give me the sales from last year, from this year to this year, for this month to this month, for example, that's natural language that would essentially be translated back to SQL, and then you get the results. And if you even able to build graphs, automatically, then maybe as a consultant, this is where you make back, basically. But, so that's kind of how I see you can maybe use low effort per se to build something quickly for a small company or something like that.
Yeah, actually, I can jump on that. I just have an idea. Maybe Derek, can you show the function that creates the prompt for the thing? I just wanted to show you something.
Yeah, what's the name?
I think you can go to LLM.py.
Okay, I'm here.
And if you scroll down, like
Is it this one? This is the last function.
Yes, this one, for example. Okay, so you can see in this case, it's a very simple prompt, right? If you look at the inputs on line 62, the schema is what we saw in the logs earlier with the structure of the SQL table, like create, energy data, blah, 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 blah. And then the parameter is actually the prompt that the user typed, right? And then you can see how it's structured, how we are prompting the LLM, how we are seeding the LLM interaction on line 65, with the system prompt. So in this case, basically, we're giving a role to the LLM, a role that it should perform on behalf of the user. So I think for maybe something that can help for monetization is if you have good understanding of the market in which you operate and know the needs of your users, you can do a lot over here, by making the right adjustments in the prompting, to give the best results that they expect, right? So, yeah. I don't know if you have any. You can just speak. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, okay. So,
Oh, okay. Never mind.
so saying, okay, I kind of gave a monetization side of it when you sort of like implemented into maybe small or medium company side of it, which is making it a little bit private and stuff like that. But my concern is every type of question or anything you ask to the machine, does it save the data? And if it does save the data, is there a way for you to say, okay, I don't want you to save this data, or I don't want, because you can ask some question and then later on, even in communication between two people, you can ask some question and you might feel that it's a dumb question, but I just want to see how it's going to sound or how it's going to look, or maybe someone will give me a response based on my question, right? So the thing with that I've gone through, asking AI or something like that. So I type a question and I'm like, okay, he gave me this question, an answer to this question. Again, one day again, I come back and then I see that my question has been saved, which I didn't want it to be saved because it was just a one-time thing. How could you sort of like make that would be a little bit complicated, but how could you make that question only a one-time question instead of like saving it and then learning everything based on your input?
Well, I mean, in the way that the data is persisted, if you're using any online service, not just AI services, like even when you use WhatsApp, or for example, the fact that we are discussing here using Google Meetup, we don't have much control over the data that they decide to keep, right? But specifically in the case of LLM and value added for customers, one option could be that if you have your own data center, you can run an open source LLM, right? Or if you have a powerful enough machine, you can run an LLM on your laptop or your desktop. That way, any conversation you have, you control the data fully.
So one thing I was thinking, okay, let's say I'm about to quit my job and I've using the private AI from the company for so long. Maybe I use it for 2 or 3 years. So I'm about to leave the company and I want to take my work or maybe erase my work from that so that nobody else use it.
Well, the thing is,
Is it
usually
possible?
with companies, when you work there, like the data you create with them, it belongs to them.
Yeah.
It's usually part of your contract. So
Yeah. So that's already illegal to start with.
yeah, if you want to do that, like, be careful.
Yeah.
Parce que la raison pour laquelle je demande ça, parce que souvent on travaille avec des compagnies, on donne notre meilleur et arrivé à un certain moment, on nous dit, oh, on n'a pas besoin de toi encore, donc on n'a pas besoin de toi, mais on a pris tes données. Est-ce qu'on peut te redonner ces données-là?
Non, mais
et j'étais dans une réunion avec un gars qui avait laissé partir. Et comme je suis le gars de sécurité là-bas, et tout ce qui est truc, comment on appelle là, conversation téléphonique, email et autres, tout, il voulait ça. Mais selon le contrat de la compagnie et la manière dont ils l'ont laissé partir, il a exprimé que non, lui, on le laisse partir parce que ils n'ont plus besoin de lui. Mais il a des informations dont ils ont besoin. Donc, lui, il veut ces informations en bas. Donc, c'était un peu compliqué, quoi. Et actuellement, ils sont en justice et autour de tout. J'ai dit, voilà un problème qui va venir aussi dans le centre des trucs, comme on appelle, de artificial learning or artificial intelligence. Can you get your data back?
No.
When you're leaving the company?
No.
I don't think you can. Vous pouvez prendre la parole. Anybody can just speak.
Je pense que Afis avait une question. Oui, moi, c'est Brunel. Entre les deux.
Yeah, Brunel.
I'll let Brunel go first. Brunel, you can go first.
Thanks. So I have two questions. The first one, I didn't get the part where the LLM was pulling the data from the database. So I'm trying to understand, is the LLM talking directly to the database, or the LLM is calling a function? How did you implement that?
Oh, okay. Maybe Derek, can you show the code again, if you don't mind? Oh, is it disconnected? Okay. Yeah. So okay. So in here, to explain a little bit more, if you take a look at line 75 to 78, right? To basically the part that says role system and then content, and the value of content is system message. This is if you want, this is to assign a role to the LLM, pretty much, right? So its role would be to generate SQL statements, based on a given schema, right? So that part is called the system prompt. And then the following line, which is 77, this is the user custom text that can change all the time, right? So the LLM behind the scenes will use the two pieces of information to figure out what it needs to do, right? And then if you look at line 77, we're using a library called Instructor. It's a library that makes it easy to do function calling. So function calling, not in the sense of like calling a function in code, but a lot of the LLM these days have this feature. So what it means is that you can pass them text and they can respond with structured data. So in this case, we tell it on line 74 that it should respond to us with structured data in the form of this object that you see, SQL select query, right? So Derek, I don't know if can you navigate to SQL select query? Yeah. So this is the structure of the object. So you can see the fields. So on line 15, line 15 is select statement, right? When the LLM responds, it's going to populate this field with the actual SQL query, and then like line 17 and 18, it will be like the start date and end date. So in the previous example, like Derek mentioned that made a request to display data between September and December, right? So when the LLM responds, the start date will become September 2023, as they put it, and the end date will become December 2023, for example.
Okay. So now my second question.
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
My second question now is like, okay, so imagine a scenario where I don't want the user to ask certain questions.
Okay. Oh, you're breaking up a little bit.
You're breaking up.
Is it better? Hello?
Yeah. Yes, we can hear you.
So I was asking, imagine a scenario where you don't want the user, by using the prompt, you don't want him to ask certain questions. For instance, you can have an employee table where I start asking about everybody's salary or personal information. How do you prevent that from happening?
So this one, I think, I mean, again, it's not 100% guaranteed, but you can narrow it down. So I think in this case, like Derek, if you can go back to the LLM file. Oh, I think we changed it last minute. But okay, so for example, on line 65, instead of saying like any SQL statement, we could restrict it. We could give it more information, like saying that when you issue the SQL statement, don't return certain columns, for example. You know, or if you don't want the user to do any destructive action for the table, you can say like only return select statements, things like that.
I even think
Okay,
that.
so
I was gonna say, I even think that 67 line, the schema, if you can instruct it to be like to follow just that schema, because if the employee table, you don't want anybody to access the employee table, you just don't provide the schema to it, basically, right?
Yeah.
So so basically there's a way, for instance, to create different roles. For instance, I don't want the people from the marketing department to ask questions about the finance department, for instance, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but I would say like instead of relying solely on the LLM to do the right thing, it's more. I think it's better to take additional measures.
Yeah.
Because if it has a hiccup for whatever reason, like
yes, that's why I was asking initially if the LLM was talking directly to the database, because you notice that LLM, when you ask them questions, they're always trying to answer. So unless you think about all the different scenarios, someone might ask a question or reformulate in a way that the LLM will go and pull the data directly from the database.
No. It doesn't talk to the database, but it generates the SQL that will run. You know, so in a way, that's like SQL injection. So if you don't want to like weaponize that SQL injection by asking for bad stuff, you can try to narrow it down a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, and then also in addition to that, take some measures. You know, maybe this thing runs on tables that are read only, for example. You know, because people are clever, they might find ways to, you know, phrase the prompt in a way that the LLM will generate the bad SQL statement that they are looking for, and then do some damage. So,
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, to add to that, just recently that ChatGPT 0, I think that they just bring out. Apparently, some people were able to jailbreak it or something like that to make it where it can tell you how to make napalm bombs, you know, which they didn't want. So, it's bad.
But whoever who did that know exactly the structure of, you know, the demand around to break that jail, I think, because to me, that's why it's very risky to just not put anything instead of putting a restriction. So a restriction is much better security than not putting even a not allowing the LLM not to answer certain stuff, because data get feed to, you know, LLM so many times by so many people. So it will always come up with something that has been fed before. And if it happened that le compteur général ou bien comment l'économe a mis l'information, c'est cette information qui va ressortir. It could be maybe, you know, the accountant decided to run some data in it, and then suddenly someone else is asking for the same data, and then it will pull out. So restriction is better than none, basically.
Yep, exactly.
Adida, you have a question?
Bon, c'est pas tellement une question, c'est par rapport à ce que Shakoul, c'est ça? Par rapport aux données, en fait, aux données, si c'était possible de demander à l'entreprise de supprimer, c'est ça? Supprimer ou de nous renvoyer les données.
Oui.
OK, en fait, bon, pour les données personnelles, oui. Les données personnelles, on peut demander à l'entreprise de supprimer nos données personnelles, etc. Mais les données qui ont été produites pendant le temps que vous passez à l'entreprise est de la propriété intellectuelle de la société. Du coup, la seule chose possible, c'est peut-être de réclamer qu'on vous donne une copie de vos données. Et même ça, il faut beaucoup de diplomatie et expliquer pourquoi, voilà, vous en avez besoin et tout. Et l'entreprise va juger si c'est pertinent ou pas. Par exemple, bon, si vous avez des choses à faire, si vous avez produit des choses que vous êtes censé utiliser pour justifier en fait vos expériences, des photos, des vidéos, etc. Vous pouvez demander une copie des données et c'est à l'entreprise d'apprécier. Mais partir avec les données de l'entreprise, ce n'est pas du tout fait. Parce que dans presque tous les contrats, c'est vrai qu'on ne prend pas le temps de lire nos contrats ingénieurs. Bon, pour ma part, je parle aussi pour moi, c'est la partie où il y a l'argent et la partie, c'est jusqu'à quand ça finit là qui m'intéresse. Mais quand vous lisez bien les contrats, vous avez toujours cette partie propriété intellectuelle qui fait que vous ne pouvez pas, si vous prenez le risque de le faire, l'entreprise peut vous attaquer. Voilà, peut vous attaquer en justice et ça serait bien dommage. Donc, du coup, quand vous êtes à l'entreprise, vous produisez des données que vous jugez importantes, mieux pour vous, c'est de les stocker et de trouver un moyen pour pouvoir les garder pour une utilisation future. Et s'il y a la possibilité au fur et à mesure de, pour ce qui est personnel, vous pouvez supprimer. Mais si vous supprimez des données que vous avez produites dans le cadre de l'entreprise, elles peuvent vous attaquer. Donc, voici la contribution que j'avais souhaité faire. Merci.
Et au fait, j'ai posé la question parce que ça venait d'un ingénieur qui avait lui-même son propre travail, son propre, comment on appelle, travail à côté, à la maison qu'il faisait. Et il s'est avéré que non, ce travail qu'il faisait à la maison peut aider la compagnie pendant son temps là-bas. Mais il était entre l'enculé de marteau. S'il utilisait cela, il pouvait faire réussir l'objectif de la compagnie. Mais s'il ne l'utilise pas, il ne peut pas. Bon, quelque part, c'était un genre, il ne savait pas quoi faire. Donc, pour être un bon employé, il l'a utilisé, mais il a dit à la compagnie que c'est sa manière de le faire. Et cette manière-là, c'est à lui seul. Donc, il n'a pas envie de le faire pour la compagnie. Mais comme il est employé de la compagnie, il est obligé à un certain niveau de le faire. Mais il veut aussi garder ces données-là. Tu vois le côté où ça devient un peu compliqué.
Dans ce cas-là, en fait, quand tu veux utiliser quelque chose de personnel dans une compagnie, tu peux mettre dans ton contrat, dire que, OK, je suis en train d'apporter quelque chose que moi-même j'ai développé en dehors de l'entreprise, dans l'entreprise.
Non, mais ça c'est ce que tu as déjà fait avant de rentrer dans la compagnie. Si tu es dans la compagnie et pendant que tu fais tes propres recherches ailleurs et tout.
Non, ça
dans ce cas, tu peux demander à revoir. Tu peux demander à ce qu'on revoie ton contrat parce que c'est ta propriété intellectuelle que tu es en train d'apporter sur la table. Et tu peux demander à l'entreprise de revoir ou de signer, je ne sais pas, quelque chose de plus au contrat pour que demain, ça veut dire, ça soit toujours ta propriété intellectuelle. Et même si l'entreprise va vouloir l'utiliser plus tard, l'entreprise sera obligée de revenir vers toi pour pouvoir négocier parce que c'est ta propriété intellectuelle. Donc, dans ce genre de cas, il ne faut même pas s'amuser. Il faut demander à ce qu'il y ait un avenant ou peut-être une politique, dans ce sens.
OK.
En tout cas, pour les prochaines fois, je pense bien. Ouais.
It will depend the company here. I think it depends on the company that you work for. If you work for like a company that is in your technology, if you build it, belongs to them. But the best way is to talk to the HR if you find out.
Did you say if you build it, belong to them? If
Yeah.
you build it outside of a company, but you know that it's gonna be useful for the company, but you don't want to give it to the company because you are, you are not, you don't. It's yours because it's yours. But you know that if you use that, ingenuity for the company, it's gonna advance the company as an employee, and you don't have any other solution than using it. So you have to go talk to a company. Whereby if you say to the company, okay, let's do this, and then they accept, and then later on they let you go, how are you gonna get back your data? That's the thing,
I think you have to read your employment contract. So whatever you agreed on joining that company, I'm sure at the period that you work for them, that will be an intellectual property for the company.
Okay.
But I
Thanks
do
for the
have a question
responses.
for Derek. So how much accuracy have you guys had with the LLM so far in generating the SQL statements?
Well, I do a lot of research on pretty much Copilot and Gemini, and at some point, I get frustrated with the fact that it's saving some of the stuff that I'm doing, because I kind of the more you use it, the more you see the answer is becoming better and better, but it's becoming better and better based on what you ask for, right? So at some point, your idea is being translated to give sense to someone else's engine, and at some point that become sort of like your intellectual property. But like you guys say, you guys don't have control over the data and stuff like that. So that's also something that is a little bit kind of like a gray area. So I kind of understand that side of it, but sometimes I feel guilty of doing some of the thing, and then I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. But at some point, there's no other stuff that can give me a better explanation than the engine. But at the same time, the engine is taking my data and then it's saving it. So kind of like double-edged sword. I mean, I'm pretty sure when you go use it more and more and more and more, you kind of start feeling that you are giving more than you are taking it. So that's what I'm saying. That's why I asked the question, because we had this employee that was saying that that was in on this case, but he kind of applied to it, and then it's going to court with the company, arguing that he made this thing better. But at some point, he didn't want it to, but because he was an employee, so he had to. It was sort of like forced, but he didn't know how to go about it. And then he's already under contract, and he has already signed the contract. Things like that. So, but I kind of understand what the lady says when she said you have to, everything you create, you have to go talk to a company before you do anything that you want to put, if it's your personal stuff and stuff like that. So, yeah.
Yeah. So just to kind of, I don't know if you talked about that already or not, but that's why like any material, any company material you use to do something in most contracts belong to the company. If you use a company pen to do something, it belongs to the company. That's why when you want to do your personal stuff, it's best to use your personal laptop as opposed to use company laptop, because they can come back and say, hey, you use our laptop to build something, it belongs to us, right? Yeah.
I thought it was even was eye-opening to me when I started contracting was even the idea that they could limit your ability to serve another company after you left through non-compete contracts.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Like not even not even like anything that you've produced, just your ability to produce.
Yeah.
And thankfully that is changing. The non-compete is kind of changing. I think the US is changing that. I think actually last 2 weeks ago, I think they're changing the law. But you're right, non-compete is another thing too. Like, you know, there's sometimes it's like you can't work for the competitor for like a year or so. So yeah. Yeah. Interesting.
I mean, yeah, in such scenarios, you have to also bargain your benefits, right? If you put in a restriction on me not to work for a competitor after you know my employment terminates with you, then I have to demand more salary to cover that. So
they're letting you go, and you want to demand more salary for that. How are they going to pay you?
no, going in. I mean, going in right before you start. Before you go under contract, you have to know what you're dealing with.
I mean, I was asking those questions based on when you are already within the company and then things are working good for you, you know. But some people might say that, oh, because of our company, you have this open mindset in a way that you are progressing in your career so fast because of the resources you're using and stuff like that. But they don't also think about where you give your data to the point where you get better at, you know, gaining answer to your issue that you are facing, and then bettering the company in its face value. But you know, just like the lady said, everything you set up, you have to talk about it before you sort of like putting into company engagement or something like that. So yeah, that's something to take in. But I don't know on you know, on the AI side sense of things, or maybe, you know, feeding data to AI, how people are gonna be able to limit themselves, especially knowing that they sometimes want something right away and they let themselves open vulnerable to giving so much and then at the end getting little. I guess it's the risk of the job, huh?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Any other comments, questions? We passed time. Like it's almost noon.
So my question was about the accuracy of using the LLM to generate the SQL statements. How much accuracy have you guys had with it so far?
Well, I mean, it's at least it follows the instructions, but we haven't really measured it. But okay, so usually, like if you want to compare it, for example, to the way that people interact with LLMs, usually, like for example, ChatGPT, they type text and they make certain requests, right? But in that scenario, they don't have much control over how the LLM answers, right? But in the case that we showed, we are interacting with the LLM in a more structured way, you know, and that's why I mentioned the function calling feature. This is something that they implement as part of the infrastructure to make it more, to at least force it to respond in the same structured manner, you know. So just by doing that, it makes it way more accurate than if somebody was just asking the ChatGPT to write a SQL statement, you know. But beyond that, we haven't really like measured to make sure that it's super accurate. It's somewhat accurate, I would say, but because we haven't made any measurements. So.
Let me add to that. Recently, I've been using ChatGPT to create some apps. So based on what I'm seeing, the code generated is pretty accurate. There are areas where you have to improve it or make changes, but overall, I'll say 90 to 95% is pretty accurate.
The one limitation that I do see with the creation of the SQL generation with the LLM is that I noticed that you have to create a class, like you have to create a class for each that would kind of mimic one of the SQL statement. Am I understanding that correctly? So for example, like you had a select like a class with like select from the table and the dates from start date and end date. So does that mean that if I want to maybe do like some crazy joins, I'll have to have a class with that structure as well?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Basically, this structure that you saw, it's completely arbitrary. You know, whoever is implementing it decides. So in the case that Derek showed, there's only one table, right? And to display the graphs, we usually, I mean, most of the queries need a range, and then to start sending the data over so it can be plotted, right? That's the only reason why you saw the start date and end date, you know. But the field that holds the actual query, you saw that it's just text. So whatever text comes out, that's what is being used.
Okay.
You know? So it depends. It's completely arbitrary, but so in the case that you mentioned, right? If you needed to do joins, in the schema, in the text schema that's part of the input parameters, you will have the table structures for all the tables involved, right? And then with the prompt, the LLM will understand that it needs to join some tables. You know.
Okay.
And you will get the final query like select from A and B where ID matches this one and that one, like something like that.
Okay. So you don't necessarily. Okay, I thought that the you had to kind of have a structure of what your query will look like so that it kind of like fills up those, I don't know.
It's completely arbitrary. So it can be any, basically you're the one deciding the structure. If you want it to be a certain shape, then you ask for it.
Okay, get it.
Yeah.
How hard was it for you guys to implement it in your project?
It took like 2 hours for the main part. So it was pretty quick. And we did it last minute too. So basically, I'll give you a secret. Like it was when we were creating the agenda for today's meeting. You know, we're like, okay, people are interested by LLM, so let's add it, right? And it's only like Friday night, like yesterday night, that we finally got to work on it without even knowing if it was possible or not. Rough night last night. So, yeah.
Well, that's the benefit of knowing things before even going through it. So you can go ask LLM, okay, but if you don't have any notion, you won't really know what it's giving you, it's true or not. So, but if you know about it, it goes faster too. So it's not only the LLM that is making it better, it's also you that is making it better. That's why I'm talking about this data, private data side of things. It's gonna be interesting.
Yeah,
but
that's true what you're saying, because it's not like sometimes I see online like people making claims like, oh, LLMs are gonna replace like software engineers. It's really funny because for it to do better work or give you like for it to become more useful in terms of code and things like that, you somewhat also have to know what you're doing or know what to ask for.
Yep.
But if you don't know any of those things to start with, it can really help you. So,
yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it will hallucinate and give you gibberish. And
yes.
If you think it's correct, you're doomed. Yeah. It can help you do work faster, that's for sure, but you have to know what you're doing. Yeah.
Yeah, it loses its train of thought. So at that point, if you don't know the programming aspect or the engineering aspect, then you'll be lost as well.
Yeah, but basically, the reason why it's important to even know at least about the topic you want it to help you with is because if you don't know about the topic in the first place and it's lying to you, you can't tell either. You know? So that's how it goes.
Yeah. So yeah, good conversation. Good conversation. Yeah. Any other comments? I know it's past. We don't want to keep people, but yeah, if you have any questions, keep asking. Yeah, other comments.
For me, just want to say thank you again for sharing your knowledge.
Keep saying thank you, Chris. We're coming to you next, right? You know that, right?
I'm not ready yet.
Yeah, thank you for letting me share.
Training.
Aziz, based on that, you think we should build a schedule where we know what presentations are coming up instead of finding out on a weekly or bi-weekly basis?
Yeah, so that's a good question, and the reason why sometimes it's on a weekly basis is because Ben and I even sometimes we don't know what we're going to talk about until about a week before, right? So, but when we have other people who want to present, then it definitely helps because then we can actually schedule a couple of weeks in advance. But yeah, the ultimate goal is to be able to schedule things like even a month in advance, right? A month and a half in advance, if we know all the topics that we're going to talk about. Because right now, like for example, as we're talking right now, like we can get ideas about, oh, okay, there's an interest about this, then we can talk about it in a week or two or something like that. So, but you do have a good point. Like it would be nice to know in advance what we're going to talk about. So we'll definitely try to.
Yeah, and also like if people have like some requests about like that's also helpful.
Yep.
You know, because sometimes like this procrastination kicks in, and then next thing you know, it's like 1 week before you're like, oh my god, I need to find a topic like right now.
I mean, it's a good thing they did it on the HTTP level. Like, can you set it up on the HTTPS level, and can it bypass DPI SSL?
Are you talking to us?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Like, I understand the question, I guess.
See, you create all of these query inside, and then you make it private. That's on HTTP side of things, right? What about if you are a company, you create it, and then for other company to use it, using it with HTTPS? Is this something possible? And if it's possible, how would you even open? Would you have to let some of the companies that are using it would you sort of like vet them some type of port, or they have to keep some port open? Because see, in the security business, I hate when someone comes in and say, oh, we don't want your firewall to be on. We don't want it with this. That kind of tells me that, okay, you are a company, we are contracting with you guys, but at some point you guys are putting us at risk.
I think this application is all internal, right? That's for your company.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, but anything you want to share with other companies, typically people do it via APIs, right?
Yep.
And then you put a key, API key, and so that's how people have access to your stuff.
But sometimes they have these firewall that they try to tell you to downgrade it. If you have some setting, they're like, oh, you have to downgrade some setting so that we can better serve you.
Yeah.
And I think the idea of planning the sessions is a good idea. Maybe you should create a form and letting people maybe they can tell you if, what kind of topics they would like to talk about, and then based on that you can propose a planning with dates, or yes, and based on that we can also create some visuals in order to better communicate on social media, etc.
Yep. Yeah, we used to do that earlier, the forums. I think then we need to bring it back. I'll take on that. I have the forums actually, and then I can drop it in the chat or Discord. I think Discord is also the place where we try to have conversations in terms of upcoming topics as well. So yeah, we'll revive that for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'll actually create just this second, I just created a channel in Discord. I call request a topic. So yeah, and I pasted the Discord link also in the chat. So anybody can join and also request a topic and we'll see it.
Yeah. Go ahead, John. You have a question, John?
Yes, I do. Thank you. I'm assuming that an LLM can reverse engineer a query and turn it into natural language. And if that's true, can I control the complexity of the language used so I can target my audience being general or being scientific? Thank you.
Yeah, it should be possible, because if there's anything that LLMs are good at is text. So any type of text, it can make it happen. Okay.
And that also depends on the prompt also that you say it, right? If you say, hey, can you use this SQL query and explain to me like I'm 5, for example, that's typically what I've seen online. People try to use explain to me like I'm 5, then it'll be able to kind of like look at the query and then explain it to you in natural language with very simple words. Yeah.
That's a great one. Thank you.
Yeah, and you'll have to mess with the temperature also to see which number best serves your purpose.
Then do I sense a business idea coming up? Is that why?
Maybe. We're all ears.
Yep, let's build a team and rule the world.
Yeah, we definitely have conversations on Discord. So yeah, that's typically where we try to have conversations on. So any other comments, questions? Ben, Derek?
Yeah, so thanks Derek for the presentation today. That was your first one. It was great.
Thank you for listening. And if this is your first time, don't worry. Ben and Aziz are.
Yeah, thank you, Derek, for enlightening us.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for listening.
Yeah. All right.
All right. Thanks, Derek.
We can close it for today.
Thank you, Derek and Ben.
Yeah, thank you, Derek.
Everybody have a good one. Until next time.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Cheers. Have a good weekend.
You too. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.